All right. So, what be happening, big dog?
Ready to get this party started.
Yeah. Well, we've had we've been really stacking up the sessions or the podcasts here lately. People are going to be like, "Look, I got to do other things. I don't have time to listen
Yeah,
to
people are
you
gonna be
guys."
like, "Do they not work?"
Golly, exactly. You
Well,
guys
I'm a
got too much to.
pastor, and Bill's a wannabe pastor, and so
Wow, what did I
oh,
do to
that was
you?
that was straight to the throat at the very
Yeah.
beginning.
Man, we did that. You did that verbal throat punch we were talking about before.
It has been a season, I think, for both of us where it's just like we're very intentional about conversating. I think that's
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
Yeah.
and one thing I want to keep prefacing is that um, we are not anti uh, churches. The organized churches, because I know that I hear me sometimes, huh?
It's terrible that we got to preface our
Well,
conversation with
yeah, but I mean, it's because if
I'm a
somebody,
pastor. I'm the one that don't want to go to church. What the heck, man?
well, I don't. I know I've been criticized quite a bit for that in the past, and I'm
Yeah,
sure I'll be criticized for it in the future. Um, but it's basically the only reason we're talking about this and really pounding the institutional church is because we understand its weaknesses and we understand what it can do and what it is impossible to get it to do. And and just being honest about it sounds like you're negative and you hate it, and it's not anything like that. I mean, we both attend one. We love the people in it. you know we participate in the events. We do everything that goes along with it, but we don't expect that much out of it.
yeah.
um, and I've described it like this before, and a lot of people just chuckle when I say it. Yeah, I'm sure you might, but it's not that it's not good. It's not that it doesn't produce something. It's just that you're paying $1,000 for a candy bar.
we yeah
You're
we've
put
conversated about that before.
you're putting a lot of effort. You're putting a lot of
Yeah,
resources, a lot of things, but the return on those resources is not anything close to what you're putting into it. If you would put the same resources and effort into individuals and reproducing, smaller concentrated groups, you'd be much more productive. But because we like bigger's better, which is not true, this ain't Texas. Not every place is, it has to be gigantic. We were talking before we got on here about how, man, uh, the the way it changes the leader, the bigger the thing gets, the more it changes the leader into something else that
yeah,
becomes pretty vile.
yeah.
And yeah, ugh.
I think one thing you've heard me talk about this for years since you've known me, knowing I came into this in a pastoral position
Right.
at a one of the biggest churches in Catawba County at that time, uh, actually rivaling where you were,
Yeah.
and didn't know you from Adam. Then had no
Yeah.
clue who you were. I probably had heard about all your heresy, but that was word of mouth. But going back to, we'll talk about that, I guess, in a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm not going to open that up now. But what I was just thinking about is over the years, I've had my wife, my mom just last night in conversation. It's like they wonder, and my wife has said, "Why in the world are you even pastoring then?" And I get that zeal,
Yeah.
that that zeal I know that is out of control at times, that desires to change something that I see because I've been in it, I see it's absolutely utterly broken, and I want to change it, and I don't want to change it as much now as I used to,
Yeah.
because you, Dillingham, many other people have helped me wrestle with it is what it is, let it be what it is,
Hmm.
and continue to be what God's called you to be, whether
Right.
you remain in it or whether you step out of it.
Right.
Because it's like I in the conversation just yesterday. Um, and this is with another gentleman, and in the conversation is again, all my eggs are not in the basket of institutionalism anymore.
Right.
It used to be everything for me funneled through that,
Hmm.
and I was able to wrestle with it, see that yeah, while it wasn't anything bad, people getting saved isn't bad, people getting baptized by immersion isn't bad, people coming into truth and sitting under what I was teaching, none of that's bad.
No.
But the question to always ask is, where is your return for all of your effort? Because any effort we put into something, there's going to be a return. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. But there's going to be, and some 30, some 60, some 100, some,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
but there's this expectation. Um, and now it's like, okay, yeah, I love the people here at Catawba. I mean, I do. Any of them that's been here long enough knows me as the pastor, as the leader. I might not visit you like you want me to, but I'll be dadgum if you're going to be let down in the middle of tragedy,
Hmm.
death, despair, because my heart is for people.
Right.
And it's just not all my attention is on Catawba Baptist Church people.
Right.
My intention is with the individuals God brings me outside, inside. I'm not trying to make them good church people. I'm trying to build them the same way I was built, to make a world impact and to do it one on one. And
Right.
it's the process of reproduction. And you can't build a disciple in the institution. That's my spiel. I'm done.
No,
You
I
can
think,
emerge and you can
yeah,
encourage
absolutely.
disciples that are in the
Right.
institution. One will never be reproduced
Right.
in that setting.
Right. Yeah, Jesus couldn't operate that way. He could
Yeah.
not, would not operate that way. And, but we think we know better. We think we have a better, we have a better
Better
spin
plan than
on it.
God.
Huh?
Yeah. We have a better plan than God, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
There's always a way that seems right, but in the end, it's the way of
Death.
death.
Yeah. So, so that kind of brings us, we've talked about, we had that interview with Jason. He told his story, kind of interviewed him, and then we talked about intentionality. And so I thought, today we would just kind of tell our stories, and talk about the situation that we come in, because we're kind of similar, but there's other people around um, around us that are going to have a little bit different story, but
That's right.
there's going to be a lot of things that are similar. I think no matter if you're a preacher type or if you're just a common Joe Schmo or you know whoever, you're going to have some. There's going to be some threads. I think.
I think one thing before you start, I'd like for you to just start with yours, and I'll kind of piggyback off of that. But I
Okay.
think one thing that I would assume, this is an assumption, I would assume that, let's say we get 5 or 6 other guys on here, or men or women, that is a part of this disciple making strategy. I think one, very few will not have somehow been impacted. Very few will say it's been outside of institutionalism.
Right.
I would think that the majority of the people that are in this process met this process through meeting somebody at a church setting.
Mm-hmm.
And not all of them. Now, believe me, there's exceptions to that, but
Right.
that is it. And so again, I'm lifting the building and that institution up a
Yeah.
little bit. That it's
Right.
a great place to find
Mm-hmm.
truth. It's a great place also to find people willing to receive truth that might not be that might be seeing things a little different,
Right.
frustrated,
Right. Right.
discouraged with what's going on, and then that's kind of going to be, I think, the motto and the
Right.
if you would say it, the forte of most of people's engagement in this early engagement. But
Well,
again, that's my assumption.
well, no, well, you're hitting a good point, and that is that disciple making, disciple, I don't want to call it discipleship because it takes a different idea, but disciple making cannot take place outside of community. It has to happen in a
Good point.
community.
We
So,
hadn't said that enough, but
huh?
that's yeah, we haven't said that enough. But
Right.
that's a big that's
Well,
big, big,
that's a
big.
big Ray Vanderlyn idea.
That's right.
That it has to happen in community. So, and when I say community, a lot of people go, "Well, that's church." Well, that's true, it is, but there's other places of community. So I don't want to limit that to an institutional church. In fact, probably one of our strongest reproducing disciples didn't come through church. He came through a family homeschooling group, and it was because we were training, getting ready for a trip, and we had a lot of stuff written on a. We had in our crazy group we had a wall that was a whiteboard. I mean, it was the whole wall. So we would draw all over the
Oh
white
yeah.
all over the wall, and so we had been training, and we had some of our lessons up there, that we were had been teaching, and this guy goes ask a guy named Randy Sherrill. He goes, "Hey, what's that?" And Randy was like, "Oh, well, it's this and this." And the guy's like, "What?" It was like like a cool drink of water, and the guy got hooked.
Uh,
And I don't think I've been to his fellowship, and I don't know if he's ever been to mine.
huh.
But we've been interacted in community, so it can happen. So if you're a part of a little league, if you're part of you
That's
know
a good point, man.
any point of community, so
Anywhere where somebody
yeah,
is can be impacted, and it doesn't even have to necessarily be real intentional. I mean, it can be intentional, but like you're the one carrying the intention if
yes,
you are the disciple maker
right,
that is being discipled or in the process of looking for someone to disciple, which I think ought to be one of the first month, right? It's
yeah,
like this is the intention set
yeah,
every time you sit with a guy is you need to be looking for somebody because they're coming and you're the
right,
guy that so again it's like there's intention,
hmm,
but we carry the intention anytime we go into a community of people. Let's just say let's even go because you know as well as I know how diverse is your Sunday morning.
yeah,
I mean, we've got a little bit of diversity at
yeah,
Catawba Baptist,
right,
but how diverse is your Sunday morning
yeah,
compared to how diverse is your kids' baseball team, football team? How
hmm,
diverse are your friends? Let's say you're at a party where there's a little bit of drinking,
hmm,
where they're just kind of having fun, hanging out. Man, what a dynamic time to start
yeah,
bringing in some of the disciple making strategies
hmm,
and emerging people just in
yeah,
conversation. So
yeah.
that's a great point, Bill.
Yeah, so
Why
so
ain't we talked
so a
about
disciple maker lives his life totally always with his antenna up, or her antenna up, and every conversation is not trivial. It can
it?
be monumental, and so it's how you just live that
Yeah,
way, and
that's
it's
good.
and it's not a it's not that you go into, so you may go into a fellowship of believers and nothing ever happened. But you might go, like you say, you might go to a restaurant, run across somebody you haven't seen, like a old high school friend or college friend or somebody you used to live around or something. You get into a conversation and they say, "Hey, what are you doing right now?" or something. Or God has a way of meandering those conversations around to where you can, you know, all of a sudden you say something, they go, "What? What? What? What?" And then then it begins to the conversation begins to deepen. I don't know how many times that's
or
happened.
the conversation.
Yeah,
I mean, I've had it happen where it's like people are leaning in, like he's saying something different, and boom, you're talking about what? And then it's just like, and
yeah,
that's usually with somebody that's in some kind of an authoritative,
yeah,
um, in some kind of leadership where but you're right, there is in just normal conversation with people out in normal situations. I mean, and that maybe that's one thing we can talk about one day because I was going to ask a question, but it'll divert
okay,
us from what our point is. But maybe one day what we can talk about is how to be intentional in a common way, like how to be how like with a question
well, I don't
with
mind talking
a
about that now if that's where we need to
okay.
go.
Well, but at the same time, I think we need to tell our stories. But let me ask you a question.
Sure.
So let's say you're out. Let's say you're at your favorite restaurant.
Yep.
The setting's there, and then you have, I don't know, not to put time on it. If you got 15 minutes, you're waiting on your foot on to be seated. They're waiting to be seated, and you see somebody you know, and and it's like you have this in your heart that
Mm-hmm.
I gotta tell them because you're excited about what God's doing in your life by
Mm-hmm.
being discipled, and you know you're also one that's being led to be a discipler.
Right.
How would you engage in that? Of course, the conversation's got to be organic,
Mm-hmm.
but what's some things that you can do that would maybe help somebody like a Marty
Mm-hmm.
that's really trying to engage people, but
Right.
he's just still very early in the
Right.
process.
Well, I think you have. Well, like any skill, it has to be honed. It has to be uh, not just practice because practicing something incorrectly doesn't make you better. So
Just ingrains it in here to
yeah,
make it
yeah,
work.
it just makes it permanently. It just makes you a permanent jerk. Um, so so it
Mhm.
really the first thing is like if I was in a restaurant somewhere and I saw somebody that I knew, uh, how how much I would share would depend about upon how deep is our relationship. So
That's a good
if your
point.
relationship's not, if it's shallow, then your conversation is going to be probably pretty shallow. It's not gonna. It's not like you're gonna be like, "Hey, how's it going? We used to work together years ago." Hey, you ever think about impacting the world?
And you ever thought about how to do it?
Yeah. Hey, it's just like it'd be like, okay,
Yeah.
wacko, get away
Oh,
from me.
yeah,
So
yeah. I've
it's,
been there.
but you know, but you're always listening with ears of if they ever say something that is even remotely connected to that, then you can baby step it down into that conversation. So they may say something um, hey, I haven't seen you. We used to work together, 10 years ago. How's it going? You go, hey man, fantastic. I've turned my life around. I'm starting to go to church, or I've quit this, quit that, and you're like, oh, really? That's cool. So where are you going? What's going on? And then you just begin the conversation, and you're like, well, how's the walk going? Is the walk going pretty good? Oh yeah, it's going pretty good. I struggle a little bit, and I'm like, okay, you're struggling a little bit, yeah, and then see, you can kind of see how you can
Yeah.
walk them into, hey, hey, if you ever need help or whatever, I work with people all the time and invest in people and try to help people, with be stronger believers and everything. If you ever need me, you let me know, okay?
Yeah.
And if you have any kind of personable relationship, they would be like, hey, thanks a lot, I really appreciate that. Or they may say, man, I have really been wanting that. It's funny you should say that. I've really
Yeah.
been needing somebody because pastor's busy, deacons are busy. I'm trying to get people to meet with people, but I'm not really being successful. There was one guy that I met with for the first 2 months we met together. He kept asking, "We're gonna still meet? We're gonna still meet?" And I'm like, why do you keep asking me that? You know? And he's like, well, I have. He could not number the amount of pastors he had approached and asked for help, and nobody would help him. And so he
Mm.
was just waiting for me to stop meeting with him.
Wow.
Yeah. So he was like really skittish about my intention and my commitment to him. And I'm like, dude, I'm here as long as you'll sit here. As
Yeah.
long as you'll stand in front of me, I'm with you, you know. And but after a while, he calmed down or settled down because he realized, hey, this guy's not just blowing
Yeah.
smoke. He's really serious. So that 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 would be, as you're talking to somebody, it has, like you say, it has to be organic or it has to flow. You don't. This isn't, hey, let me pounce you and tell you how bad you are, and let me tell you how you're doing it wrong. That used to be my mantra. Oh, you know what? You know,
Yeah.
you're a pastor of a church. You're obviously doing it wrong. So let me tell you how that.
No, yeah. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Not that that was ever directed toward me, but it was
Oh gosh.
it was my sin. We shared a very similar zeal
Yeah.
for the disregard, and it wasn't really disregard for the church. It was disregard for the system,
Right.
disregard for the process of what we saw it not doing, being both involved in it,
Mm-hmm.
but all I used to ever do was just try to start a conversation based on my pastoral.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm a pastor now. Oh, Derek Jones is a pastor? What the heck?
Yeah.
I remember that dude from way back, but it was a good way for me to start a
Right.
conversation to go deeper with
Right.
people. And so, as much as I dislike the label at times with what it puts me up as a leader in this institution that I don't even sometimes agree with,
Mm-hmm.
and at the same time, it is a good conversational piece. But I've noticed, and like something you were saying, it sparked a memory of many of the ways I've engaged guys over the years.
Yeah.
And it's usually in conversation, I can see where frustration
Yeah.
is, and I can see where disgrace is, and I can see where discouragement is. And you see all of these sometimes negative things, but also you see sometimes guys are getting moved by God, like
Yeah.
God's moved in and done things, and then it's like you wanna say, do you want more?
Right.
And I noticed at times, and I was going to ask you this because I think it goes along with it. So, how confident are you to tell a guy that if you stick with me long enough, I'll give you a new Bible and actually make you not even recognize yourself
Yeah.
in a year? How confident are you in saying that to somebody?
Oh, 100%. I mean, if you've been in the rut, or they say rut. Every time I hear a rut, it's just a grave with the both ends of it kicked out. Um, but if you're in a rut, or if you are frustrated, or if you've been in this system for a long time and you've got all this knowledge and you have nowhere to go with it, yeah, I feel pretty confident in saying, yeah, I'm gonna give you a perspective, and I say I'm gonna hand you a brand new Bible, and it really ticks people off, and that's okay. Sometimes you need to be ticked off, but it's basically giving you a new perspective and reading it in a way that you've never read it before. Because there's a way to read the scriptures that will produce Phariseeism, right? And there's a way that you read the scriptures that will produce the life of Jesus. So you can read the same book, come out completely different, looking completely different. So that's what you're referring to
Yeah.
is, one guy I told that to actually confessed that when I told him that, it made him mad, but he had so much respect for me, he didn't reveal it. He didn't reveal his anger. But then he said, "You know what? You told me that, made me mad. But you know what? You're right. I have a brand new Bible." So yeah. Uh,
One thing interesting, I when you started talking about, the question was this, it's like there's got to be a confidence in the disciple and the disciple maker.
mhm.
And I'm referring to, if you're a disciple maker, you have to have been discipled at some point.
Sure.
There's zero chance of you being a disciple maker.
Very. It's not impossible, just not probable.
Yeah. Yeah. And with that, the confidence that in me, I started seeing my confidence change a couple years ago. And it wasn't that I didn't have confidence before, because I trusted the word and the spirit to do the work,
Hmm.
but I had not seen a lot of evidence. And I had seen evidence with the guys that I discipled, but I hadn't really seen much of, and I shouldn't even say miraculous. I hadn't seen a lot of just astronomical change in people.
Right.
And go all the way back to a guy 3 years ago that showed up in desperation. And that's when God started to change my heart, because not a single soul in the community that I live in would have given this dude a snowball chance in hell to do anything
Yeah.
for God.
Right.
Sadly to say, he is in prison today.
Mm.
Having said that, he was one of the first ones that I started to engage with different intentions, to the point where he showed up. I said to him, if you continue with me, give me 6 months, it was 6 months or a year, I said, and you look back at your life, and if you have not seen a drastic change in who you are and felt a drastic change in where you are, meaning that you're getting moved beyond you, I said, then we can quit. We can stop.
Right.
And we got to about 8 months, and a big failure happened with him,
Hmm.
and he walked off. He didn't give the process time. Now
Hmm.
fast forward to Marty, and Marty was he actually came on to our last podcast. He's a guy that I've been discipling for about a year and a month or two. And I told him, I said, Marty, and I think I might have asked him in the podcast, um, but I know I asked him a lot. I said, what did I tell you when we first started? And I told him, I said, you will not recognize yourself in a year
Hmm.
if you continue to follow along. So it's kind of like a bait to
Yeah.
just try to get them
Yeah.
to come in, but it's also a confidence in knowing that I know what this process has done to me. I know what it's done to others, and I guarantee you it'll be the same for you.
Yeah.
And it's just that you don't even have to say that, because that's a little arrogant.
Yeah.
It could be handled that, like you said, that it upset that guy when you said, you hang out with me long enough, I'll hand you a new Bible.
Yeah.
But we're confident enough in what we do that if somebody gives the Spirit of God the time, and us, the
Right.
ones that are translating the information, the time, we're going to be patient. We've learned that.
Right.
We've learned to be patient with people,
Well, yeah.
because we see the intention, we see the outcome,
Yeah.
whereas they've got to also be patient with themselves and with the process.
So is it, back, I'm going to tell everybody knows I'm older than dirt anyway, but, um, is it arrogant for
15
Larry?
years on me.
Is it arrogant for Larry Bird or Michael Jordan to say, "Hey, I'm going to drop 40 on you"? I mean, yeah, it sounds arrogant, but they can back it up.
Yeah,
They can
got
do it.
proof.
Yeah, they
That's
can.
right.
Yeah, and if you don't believe them, watch. They're going to hurt you.
Yeah,
Um, and that's what we're talking about is we're not just saying that to be, you know to be a shock for a shock value. It's
yeah,
because we can back it up, and plus, it's part of the, you know and I've said this to guys before too. I'm like, I want you to look at you through my eyes for a minute, and then I'll describe to them what I think their potential is, what they can do, what they could be, and they can see, and hopefully I give them a picture of where God wants to take them. Okay,
Mm, mm.
and usually it's, if I tell them, this is the way I see you, this is the way I look at you, and usually they go, that's not me, or I would never describe myself in that way. And I'm like, well, that's what you're gonna be. That's where you're gonna be in a amount of time if you hang in here. And again, that sounds arrogant in a lot of ways, but it's not like we can't say, well, it happened with this guy. Well, it happened with this guy, or it happened with that guy over there. So why, what do they have that you don't?
That's right. Well, and it goes back to the process,
Mm-hmm.
trusting the process.
Yes.
And the process is handled differently in everybody's process is completely different,
Yeah.
which we'll see that when we tell our story. Our
Right.
process was completely different
Sure.
because of just our life, but the process has the same intention. The
Exactly.
process is to get you from focused on you and or something that's not necessarily even remotely close to God's process or how God sees.
Well, exactly.
So it goes from blindness to revelation. It goes from being deaf to being able to hear. It goes from being all about you and your empire to being all about him and his kingdom.
Right.
That's just three very simple examples of this is what the process isn't dumbing itself down for Bill or for me, or the process does what the process does.
Right.
And the process is this is how Jesus did it. There's zero question
Right.
about how Jesus did it. And if Jesus did it that way, I think that is the only way.
Right. So
That,
God approaches us as individuals, and in how we're wired, our experiences, everything. He approaches us like that. He's gracious to us, and he approaches us where we are and in what we are. And so we have to mimic, we have to be imitators. That's the Ephesians 5:1, be imitators of God, right? We have to approach people in the same way that we are gracious to them and we meet them where they are. And, you know, no two processes are going to look identical. No two relationships are identical. They're always going to have a variation. They're going to have differences, nuances, but they're going to have the big chunks, the big ideas are going to be present in each one, right?
yeah.
So so like somebody says, well, so and so does it this way or so and so does it that way. I don't care how you do it, as long as you get to the destination. And they're like, well, you're taking a really long way around. Yeah, well, let them let them, because if they may find something along the way that is real beneficial, or they may realize, hey, you know what, I'm really taking a long way around here. I need to be a little bit more productive, more simplified, or whatever. Or hey, I'm not being, you know you start producing shallow people. You go, hey, I need to deepen this a little bit, because obviously I'm turning them out too quickly, because they have no depth. And as soon as something hits them, there's that soil, the shallow soil. As soon as something hits them, knocks them over like a pin.
Yeah. And then I can even say on the flip side of that, you can take them so deep in truth, but give them no outlet.
Mm-hmm.
Lead them to um, maybe things other than the next man,
Yeah.
and you see this truth that just sits there, and it sits there, and
Yeah.
it sits there, and it's like it's the manna that's not picked up, and
It
it
rots.
becomes it rots, it becomes
Yeah.
full of maggots. It's just, and it's not that the truth is losing its power. It's
Mm-hmm.
that the truth has to have an outlet. And I've seen a lot of the guys, and this is just a point of honesty, but a lot of the guys that I've met and that
Mhm.
I've discipled had a hard time moving.
Yeah, you can't be the
Had a
Dead Sea. You can't
Yeah,
just constantly take it in,
that's
and
right.
because it's just gonna. There's no life in that.
And I hold some responsibility to that. Not just I'm not going to blame it on institutionalism and
Right,
labor
right, right.
because I have to mimic what I see the Father doing. I have to move. I have to do, but I also have to give a little push every now and then.
Right.
And it's like, well, that sounds like you're narcissistic and in control of the situation. Well, I am in control of the situation. If I'm the one that's leading and discipling, there
Absolutely.
is a sense of control.
Mhm.
So here's the other question, and then let's hit our dot our I's and cross our
Okay.
T's with our stories. But here's my
Okay.
other question.
Sure.
So the other question would be, um, in line of what I said, which is, and I just lost my train of thought. God help me. This is where you would stop it and edit and then go back and be like, let Dummy Derek get
Yeah.
his mind wrapped
No.
around this
No.
thing. But
I'm not.
no, we
I'm not saving you. No.
we don't have that pleasure, brother. So everybody can see that failure. But again, I have no clue what I'm talking about. Well, I forgot. I completely forgot. And the question was great because it was gonna yeah,
Segue.
yeah. So
What were we
anyway,
talking about? Well,
it'll come back to me.
talking back to deep but no outlet, right? And
Yeah,
maybe this
yeah.
will remind you. There was a guy that I was working with, and he said, when I told him about the rabbis and everybody, of Jesus' day memorized the scriptures and everything, um, he said, okay, so I'm going to take that to heart, and as soon as I memorize the Bible, I'm going to start making disciples.
Mm,
And I went, okay,
yeah,
yeah, that's not going to happen. Okay, it's not. Hey, when I'm ready, when I've got all my ducks in a row and they're quacking, then I'm going to make disciples. Yeah, you will not make one. If
mm,
when you think you're ready, then you're never going to make them. Okay, because you need to move in your weakness. You need to move in your God help me
yeah,
state. You know, uh, because it's not necessarily about it's about moving in the spirit versus relying on the flesh. And so, and to this day, I mean that was, gosh, 15 years ago. Guess how many disciples this guy has made? Zero.
yeah.
Because guess how much he's memorized of the Bible? Probably not very much. But he set this lofty goal for himself and thought he was going to do it in his own, oomph.
Yeah.
And no, it ain't. If you think you're going to do this in your own oomph or your own power, good luck there, Buttercup. It ain't going to happen.
I see it like I see it like uh the flood comes in and it's like you can fight that flood. I'm thinking of a tsunami, which
Yeah,
is not necessarily a flood. That's a major force.
right.
And it's like you can fight that. You can try your best to get out of that. But sometimes the best thing to do is just kick your feet up and let that thing take you where I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
fought it. I've fought it many a times in my own power. I've tried to push ahead. I've tried
Yeah.
to develop a guy in my own flesh. I've tried, and when you see the result of your labor,
Mm-hmm.
and you see that very well in the men that you pour into, because it's a lot like raising kids.
Mm-hmm.
We won't get off on this, but
Okay.
I can look at my three boys
Oh yeah.
and I can see a lot of my effort, wrong effort, a lot of my flesh. And it's like, holy crap. But thank God you can see a lot of evidence sometimes of some of that,
Right.
that good, that positive. as the New Agers would say, that positive energy, that work of the Spirit with the truth and with the reality of God as we've relayed it. It's still there, but this like I've this process has helped me see myself better from God's eyes than I could have ever seen myself had I not poured my life out on behalf of other people.
Yeah.
Had I not been a disciple maker, I don't think I would have ever seen who I really am. So it
Yeah.
actually the process brings out the best in the one willing to give their life up.
Yeah.
And yet you feel like you're constantly losing a lot of times. You feel like you're fighting an uphill battle. But I think I can look back over the 18, 20 years. I know you can. And I can honestly say if I would have stayed in the place I was in the position I was in and not had Jason White show up with Tally Ho the Fox, then I'm not saying I would have been off the tracks, but I don't know if I would have fully realized the full potential and yet still need to realize greater potential. I don't think I would have realized who I am and who God called me to be for the sake of others without disciple making, without the strategy in my life.
I agree. I agree. Because that's what disciple making does. It turns you out.
Yeah.
It and does it. It doesn't make you think less of yourself. It just makes you not think of yourself.
Yeah.
So, and not perfectly. I mean, there's plenty of people that would say I think more about myself than I should, um, and that's fair. I mean, I'm not um, proclaiming perfection in no way, shape,
Right.
or form, or superiority in process. So
Yeah.
if somebody says, "Hey, I think you're doing it wrong. I think there's a better way to do it," I'd say, "Hey, lead the way. I'm 100% good with you showing me how to do it." So uh, yeah, it makes you non-protective. It makes you protective of the right things and non-protective of the
Yeah.
things that are garbage.
Voice.
Did you ever remember your question?
No, I haven't. It's just like it was one of those in and out.
Zoom.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right.
Went in and out.
So um, real quick, I'm gonna try to give like I said earlier, give you a nickel version.
Yeah.
Um, I grew up in church. My dad was a pastor. Did all the things. Really at a really young age. Did a lot of stuff. So um, been in it a long time. So this system is not brand new to me, obviously. So, um, but I was in a what I like to affectionately call an independent by God Baptist um, church. If you know what an independent versus Southern Baptist versus Presbyterian, if you understand all that, um, but in an independent Baptist church, the pastor's pretty much a dictator. He what he says goes, and he's the leader, and that's okay if that's the way you want to set it up. I really don't care. Um, but anyway, so my dad uh, passed away, and I was in that church, but he had some frustrations and things, and I think we even talked about that last time when we were with Jason and Marty. Um, he had some frustrations and passed those frustrations, not so much frustrations, but observations down to me, because when you have somebody that you highly respect like that say, "I don't know what the hell's going on," you kind of go, "Okay, I need to pay," you know.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to pay a little bit more attention here. And so then God moved me to a Southern Baptist church, which Independent Baptist calls the devil. So there's animosity, to say the least, between
Yeah.
Independent and Southern Baptist. So, for me to end up in a Southern Baptist church was kind of like my mom was like, "What the heck are you doing?" I'm like, I don't know, Mom. This is where God's got me. When I walked in that place, it was like, and it was like a large church. So, and what I mean by large is, running um, 1,000 in church service on Sunday. So, I got really involved in leadership. I was volunteer, staff, and at my job, I just I was working that job plus pretty much working two full time jobs. Not completely two full time jobs, but my part time job was the church, and it was uh, for free. I was at Rent a Mule, right? Um, and so anyway, so I've got this stuff going on in my head, but in the whole time I wanted to be the guy. I wanted to be the guy in the pulpit. I wanted to be the guy and head of the ministry. I wanted to be the guy that had his name everywhere and everybody knew. And I really wanted to, what you were saying, build my own kingdom, and that was my drive. But I thought in my mind I wanted to build this thing and do this thing so God would be glorified. And that's a nice sentiment, but that's not how it happens. You get glorified and God kind of gets a tip, you
Yeah,
know. and
5% too.
if that. Um, so, I've got that mindset. And all of a sudden, this guy shows up, um, and he starts preaching and teaching in a way I'd never heard, and with a confidence and chutzpah, arrogance, that I was like, man, that's cool. You know, I want to sound like that. So I started pursuing him, and I think about the first conversations I had with him, and I wish I could take them back because I sound like an idiot. Um, you know what I'm saying? And so anyway, but this guy he was pumping information to me. I mean, he was just pumping information with no regard to what it was actually doing. Well, eventually I heard that, and God revealed to me through truth that my job was to impact the world. And when that hit me, there was a vulnerability and a stripping down
Mm.
that I was. It's like being at the Super Bowl and somebody takes you at 50-yard line and strips you down naked. I
That's
mean
vivid.
that,
That's
huh?
vivid. That's vivid.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's the feeling I had. I mean, how much more embarrassed or how much more vulnerable can you feel?
Mm.
Um, and it being a cold day. How's that?
I was waiting on that one. Up in
Yeah,
Green Bay.
I
Up
was
in
just in the
Green Bay in
pool. I was
December.
just in the pool.
Yeah, 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 yeah. George Costanza. Yeah.
so, so I was like, I was literally in my own soul went. I was like, shit. I mean, I was
Yeah.
just like, I've got nothing here. I've got nothing, and I knew I needed help, and this guy was the only guy I knew that even had a clue, and I realized that
Because
disciple
he was the
making.
information bearer.
Yeah,
He's the
yeah,
one that's like you.
yeah. So I knew at that time that disciple making was the only way that you're going to reproduce enough to impact the world. It just became that clear. And so I called him and I said, "Hey man, you got to get me out of here." And it wasn't like, "Hey, you got to get me out of here." It was like, "You got to get me out of here." I was busted up. I was broken, just crying. And he's like, I'm like, "You got to get me out of here." He's like, "Get you out where? Go what?" And I'm like, "I don't care. I don't care. You got to get me out of here. You got to train me." Pretty much is what I was saying. You got to train me in this, man. And so he obliged to help me and started me down this path. Now the path has been rocky. It's been uh, educational. It's been at times I felt like my intestines were out on the table. Um,
Yeah.
But I'm looking back. I'm looking at the guy pre-disciple making, and I don't like that guy. that guy.
Amen.
That guy. I
Touchdown.
cannot believe. Yeah, I cannot believe the transformation. and and the things that I talk about with some people when I get involved, and I don't wear that on my sleeve. So it's like there's a lot of people that know me that don't have a clue at what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
that's, you would rather have it that way.
sure. I mean, I'm not. I mean, you being impressed doesn't get add $1 to my bank account or really give me a gratification or get it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter.
No, it's not a kingdom. It's not a
No,
kingdom thing.
no, and people, and then, but then it starts. If you ever get in a conversation with somebody, and it starts coming out, and they go, "How many countries have you been to? How many times have you been to that country? What are you doing? How long you been doing that?" I mean, it becomes, you know, and it's not like you're trying to hide it either. It's just
Yeah.
that you're not. That's it's just not productive for the process to wear it on your sleeve.
Yeah.
Um, but and then you know because my zeal, like you're talking about my zeal, I tried to drag everybody in that I thought had potential by my standards, and those people wouldn't have it. They're already doing their own deal, and you know that's great, but that doesn't sound like what I've heard we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
You know, hey, don't worry about the institution necessarily. Focus on the individual. Yeah, but the institution is the only thing that I've ever seen. So how does that work? And you know, a mutual friend of ours, used to have trouble with it, but now he realizes that being a pastor is just like having a job. Like
Yeah.
I have my own job. I work for a company that shall remain nameless. That I work for a
Yes.
company, and you know that job does not necessarily intersect with disciple making intentionally, but sometimes it does overlap, but most of the time it doesn't. So a pastor being in a church discipling, just because you're the pastor doesn't mean that overlaps into discipling, or vice versa.
Yeah.
They're independent of each other, but they might coincide every once in a while.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to disciple because you're a pastor, you disciple in spite of being a pastor.
Yeah.
So
The latter.
yeah. So
Well, one thing about you too, Bill, and you touched on this, but you go back and say a few things about this, which I think will be a good point of reference for me, for others, and that is you, with your past, which, if we kind of lined our uh, day of reckoning,
mm-hmm.
right, we're not too far off time wise, a couple years. But your path is a lot different than mine because you're kind of the grandfather of a lot of what we see going on in the community. Although, we know Herb and we know Herb's impact is still there.
Right.
But my question would be how, like, you look back at you've made a lot more failures than I have.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is because you came in it completely differently than I did as far as where you are with the process. So would I have ever known about this strategy, this truth that I think is mind changing, life altering, had it not been for Bill?
Mm-hmm.
And the reality of that is I could have found it somewhere else
Right.
through some other person, but I didn't. I found it through literally the guy that was under you
Mm-hmm.
in the youth you and
Yeah.
Jason White's connection, and then
Yeah.
how you gave him the book, and then, maybe not intentionally trained as much as what you would have trained somebody else. But nonetheless, my question is, has your failures been impactful for other
Absolutely.
people?
Yeah. Yeah. Because it shows failures are good because it shows you your when you drive the bus, or not so much drive the bus, but when you make the way, when it's all in your flesh, it's usually crash and burn, and it's ugly, right? And so God says, okay, it's just like when you would, we talk about our kids. It's just like your kid when you try to help them do something and they go, oh, no, 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 I can do it, and they can't, right? So you, what do you do? What can you do? Nothing. You got to let them do it. Hey, you're going to ruin that. Hey, you value that. I know you value that, but you're going to ruin that if you do that. Well, I know I want it that way. Okay, knock yourself out. Oh, Dad, it's ruined.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I tried to tell you that, but in your arrogance and your self confidence, you decided you knew better than Pop. So now, and I did the same thing. God's going, hey, be gracious, be this, be that. Think about my son, how he did it, how I showed him how to do it, and you're not doing it that way. And I'm like, yeah, but I got it. I got this. I got this. And wham, you bust your head, you bust your nose. Um, but in those, you realize, what, I need to. I think I just need to follow the model and quit trying to make up a new model.
Yeah. And that's something that I wrestle with early on. And like real quick, I don't want to go really too in depth with mine. I think we've talked about, and we are somewhat trying to limit this time. But early on, that's what I struggled with
Mm-hmm.
this. I saw it as something that I needed. It's like it came in like a beautiful gem, like a gold nugget. And the more I fiddled with it and messed with it, it was like it became what I wanted to become. It
Mm-hmm.
became something about, oh, this is a new way to help me be a discipleship pastor. Or it was like this strategy that came from Herb's teaching, but just that's in scripture. It's not like he made this up. It's in
Right.
scripture. But this strategy for me early on was just a way, going back to, we've said it, I'll say it all the time, is a way for me to continue to enhance my empire, to
Mm-hmm.
continue to enhance my what I'm trying to show people I can do for my own benefit. Like early on, I think we all will wrestle with that
Yeah.
because there's something that we want to show people, especially if we had I've had a failure of a past before I came into being called by God, which was a calling by God. That was way supernatural for him to call me into a relationship with him that ultimately became a pastoral leadership position. But prior to that, I had been the screw up everybody kind of expected me to be. Not that I came from broken home, didn't come from a broken home. I came from prestigious high school teachers. My grandfather taught at Bandy's. My father taught at Newton Conover High School. So I came from a educated, this more sophisticated, if you'd want to say, and hell, we're far from sophisticated in Sherrills-Ford, North Carolina, in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, where my grandfather and his family grew up. But nonetheless, there was this, I felt like I had to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Early on, this was a way to help me achieve my goal,
Right.
which is, all right, not only is he a pastor, but look how good of a pastor he is.
Yeah.
He cares about other people, and and so my story, and I don't want to go into detail, but you and I had a similar experience in the institution
Mm-hmm.
to where our hand was forced.
Mm-hmm.
to see the institution the way it is,
Yeah.
which the institution is set up with man's intention usually and with empire in mind. And when I say empire, it's building something for man, not something for God. And the beautiful paradox and the beautiful contrast that I had when I was at that church was this is one ultimately that does not support man's agenda but builds God's kingdom. Whereas this right here, institutionalism, the church is not there to support God's agenda as much as it is used to bring up man's
Yeah.
empire. And I got to see this contrast. And then guess what God allowed me to do?
Mm.
Choose you this day whom you will serve.
Yeah.
And I wrestled with that for years, even as I left that church, was fired, kicked out of that church, came into a 6 month period where I said, screw everybody, screw the pulpit, screw this calling I think God gave me. I don't want to do it. I don't love people. And the next thing you know, I get called to a church called Catawba Baptist. I'm rolling on 18 years next week, 2 weeks
Mm.
from now. And
Wow.
it's like, has it been easy? Heck no, it ain't been easy.
Right.
It's been failure after failure, but that's my story with what this strategy has done. And you back up about 2 years after that, Matt and I knew each other. Our connection was mutual through our wives who were first cousin, but we competed against each other from Bandy's and Maiden,
Mm.
right? Like we competed football, baseball. I don't think Matt played basketball. He ain't gonna listen, but he's not an athlete like me. So anyway, it's all good. That's for you, Matt. No, I'm kidding. Only reason I say that is my junior year, we beat him his senior year at Maiden. And I think it was only like the fourth time in the history of Bandy's that they beat Maiden in football. But nonetheless, we had a great connection through our wives, and he was going into seminary. Little did I know, we went down there with me intending to go to Southeastern Seminary in Raleigh. Matt and April were there. We went and stayed with them for the weekend, and we were out again. I was saying God's calling me to go to seminary. Well, little did I know, a week before we were getting ready to pull the plug, and that was going to be the case. My wife finally was honest enough to say, "I don't want to leave my family. I don't want to leave the business that I'm a part of in the family. I don't want to go to Raleigh." And so I'm like, "What the heck?" So fast forward about a year or two, I get settled with not going to seminary, which in my opinion is the greatest decision I ever made. One of the greatest decisions. That's my opinion.
Mm.
But Matt keeps coming into the situation, and Matt is at a church called Bethany in Raleigh.
Mm.
He was in town for Christmas, him and his wife. This was 18 years ago. And I had already had my grits cooked.
Mm-hmm.
My eggs were scrambled, and my brain was already in this process of trying to rationalize how can I be a pastor and how can I be a disciple maker? And it's just like this constant tug of war. But the beautiful thing about it is I was able to bring somebody else into this process that was almost just like me in so many ways. I just handed him the book one day and said, "Hey, dude, you need to read this book." And then pretty much the rest is history. He moves to back into our area and takes on a pastoral at a large church not far from where I'm at right now, and he's still there too. But I bring that up that there's very few pastors I have talked to, very few institutionalized leaders that I have talked to over my time of 20 years that would even wrestle with this idea.
Mm.
Very few. And I'm a pastor and I can say it. It is not appealing to have this information that says basically your way is not the way. It's not the wrong way, but your way is not the way to reach the world.
Right.
Your way is to build numbers, to grow a building, to build a people so that you can implode and so you can continue to have a holy
Right.
huddle. Whereas this strategy, if anything, walks right in and takes a huge dump on it and says, that's a pile of poop. And I
Mhm.
just added to it because this strategy right here is the strategy that Jesus upheld and his disciples ultimately. It's the reason that we are talking today about
Yeah.
this strategy is not because a man grew a building to about 400 or 500 people or 4 or 5 thousand. There's nothing wrong with buildings and people,
No.
but it ain't going to do the job. And
No.
so thank God I was able to bring Matt into this with me. And now he's in his own wrestling cage. He's in his own cage match with this. But at the same time, he's moving now.
Right.
He's seeing some things and
Well,
that's good.
yeah. The the thread of, when you have a preacher type, which, yes, I've never been officially a pastor. Okay, so fine, but I had those
You've
tendencies.
been,
Huh?
yeah. You
So
you've been an unofficial pastor,
yeah,
but
yeah,
you've experienced
right.
the leadership
Yes,
role,
exactly.
the weight,
And
the challenge of it. Yeah.
right, and I understand. I understand that the only way that a pastor or leader or a missionary, anybody that's in what I would call professional Christian, uh, they they are not going to look at any other direction until theirs either utterly fails or God puts some sort of frustration or they see the futility of building the thing.
Yeah.
And until that happens, you leave them alone. If you're listening to this and you know a pastor and you're trying your best to get him involved in something he don't want to be involved in, leave him
You want
alone.
to get fired? You want to get kicked out of the church? You tell him his vision is not lining up with God and see what
Oh,
happens to you.
law.
That's exactly what I said in my
Yeah,
zeal.
yeah.
And that's exactly what got me fired about 2 days, 3 days after that. But the
Eh,
good thing, and we'll say, I think I'll speak for you as we
mhm.
kind of wrap it up with
Yeah,
this idea, going back to frustration, going back to you were where you were, I was where I was. I had already been failing, but I was trying my best to succeed.
mm,
And but my what I was trying to succeed at was not necessarily even right.
right.
But then I got to the end of that and it was like I'm spending 80 hours a week in this building, sometimes 90 if you count my youth trips that I was doing through the week. And I had a 1 year old, a two, or a newborn, a 1 and a 2 year old. And I'm out spending 80, 90 hours a week institutionalized. And I was like, this sucks. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. Not to mention the programs that were going on. So my frustration was at an all-time level.
Yeah,
My frustration with the system, with what I was seeing, I was producing, was I was literally about done with everything. And then this information comes in at the right time. Didn't mean everything went great after that, but this information, it will save you from you and it will free you up from your own selfishness to see that other people matter and they matter more than you because you've got to train them that they matter more than you so that they'll be the same, have the same intentions with the guy or the person that they disciple. Again, institutionalism does not have that intention.
right,
It doesn't.
right.
Count people instead of building people that count. A
Yeah.
great quote from Herb Hodges.
Oh yeah.
And we don't, and Jesus never counted the masses, but he definitely built men that counted.
Mm, yeah, that's good. Yeah, it sounds a little cliche, but it really is true.
Only sounds cliche to us because we've heard it for so long, but
That's
yeah,
true. That's true.
it might be
But
mind blowing for somebody.
and the I think like what happened with Jason White, the guy who brought you into this process. Um, I handled him in a way that nobody would handle anybody. Uh, and it's not a recipe for just like I said. It's got to be depends on the depth of your relationship, right?
Yeah.
So he was in I was over the youth group in this Independent Bible God Baptist Church, and so he was a part of that, and he grew out of that, and I left, and so I hadn't seen him, and you see everybody at weddings and funerals, so I saw him at a funeral. And I said, hey, here's some information. I knew he had a passion, a desire to serve God, and we had that enough relationship where I could bounce that on him without him going, oh, you're a whack job.
Yeah. Yeah.
He probably still thought that anyway. But I gave him the information. It was, I gave him audio tapes to listen to, and I didn't see him for a year or so, and then I saw him again probably a year later, and I said, did you listen to that, tapes? No, I hadn't had a chance to listen to it. I hadn't had a chance to listen to it. I'm like, okay, well, let's do it. Like, get back with me. And he's like, and then I saw him maybe 6 months later, and I said, hey, did you listen to that? And at that time, I rich I'm not, so I'm, it was at my expense. I'm giving him this information, so I knew he had something valuable, and it had cost me money to give it to him. So I saw him the second time. I said, you listen to those tapes yet? And he goes, no, I ain't listened to them yet. I said, give them back to me. I want them back.
I've heard that story many times.
I want them back.
Love
and
it.
He's like, well, no. I'm going to listen to him. I'm like, look, it's okay. And I give him freedom. I was like, hey, man, no sweat, no harm, no foul. If you don't listen to him, don't listen to him. But I need those tapes back, because if you're not going to use them, if you're not going to listen to them, I need to give them to somebody that's going to.
Yeah.
Well, that pissed him off enough to where he was like, I'm going to listen to him. So he listened to him, and he got wrecked. And called me up, and then, the saga is, I started meeting with him, started training him, took him overseas a couple of times, and then then he goes, hey, I got this guy Derek, I want to take Derek. And so I'm like, okay, so me and you and Derek and my mom at the time, I said, we're gonna go, and we went and spent time in a foreign country, and I think that was my first introduction to you.
Yeah.
And I think your first introduction to me, and I don't know, I don't know what you thought when you first met me. You was
Still here
probably like,
today, brother. We still here today.
yeah, you
I
probably
thought
were
she was
like,
just a big old goofball.
and you've been proven right over
Nah.
and over.
And the good thing about, again, that's what we kind of prefaced this whole conversation with at first, which is everybody comes into the process differently.
Yeah,
Like some by force, some with great intention, some come in almost just it's by divine providence. It's just God drops stuff in your lap. And I think that my story, your story, and you even telling that about White Boy is a thing of beauty, because and even with Matt, it's just like, it's not that it just happens, but when this stuff gets in you
yeah,
and you become passionate about
right,
anything, it's going to be what is your conversation starter. If not starter, it's going to be what you want, or would love for the conversation to go to. It's going to be what you build your life on. It's going to be how you are in. It goes back to intention. So, hey, how you get in, you know, Marty, I don't think he would mind me at all saying this, but he wasn't far from taking his own life.
wow,
That's how bad he was
mm,
when he showed up to me.
right,
So again, what brings you here is frustration, it's discouragement, it's something's got to give. I can guarantee you right now, you ask Matt Romans the same question. When I, just because of my zeal and passion, gave him the book, started talking him about what we're talking about, I can bet my bottom dollar he was frustrated at
oh
Bethany
yeah.
in Raleigh.
Well, that
He was
he had even
frustrated.
said that. I think if
Yep.
we'll get him on here at some point, but he
Yeah.
would say he looked at the he looked at the machine, he looked at the institution, and went, ugh, and was like disgusted with it, and saw the futility of it, and where it was going no place, and God just kind of ripped it out of him. So, you know, the most kind thing God can do to you sometimes is just make you frustrated as hell,
That's it.
and just
And fail. And
then,
let you fail.
yeah, and then beat the hell out of you, and
Yeah.
then just with mercy and kindness beat the hell out of you.
Rip your leg off and kick you over the side of the head with your own leg and then hand your leg back to you. Yeah, now figure this one out.
Yep. And I'm sure we'll mention this many times. I'm sure, because it's like you say, it's a common thread.
Yeah.
But it goes back to that. You know, if you're not intending, if you ever intend to impact the world through, yeah, and not hey, let's all gang up together and do it. No, as an individual, as if you're standing like Jesus was, you know, when he had all of his Father's truth, and it was up to him to do it, and nobody else could do it. Then, until you stand like that, you will always try to force this through some sort of system. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. And we're always going to choose the path of least resistance in our
Yeah.
flesh.
Yeah.
And the path of least resistance is let's just keep going with the flow.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of times, we talked about this earlier. Sometimes I said, it's kind of like, well, Derek, you're saying two different things. Because I said, well, sometimes you just need to kick up your legs and go with the flow. Other times, though,
Yeah.
disciple making, a lot of times when we really see it for what it is, you literally feel like you're walking up river when everybody else is coming down river.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a part of the development. I've been there. I've been there more recently, more in the last 2 years than I've ever been. I feel like I'm going uphill. I feel like I'm by myself more,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not. But I feel that sense of if I don't do it, who else is going to do it? I know there's others, but
Yeah.
just this, it's not loneliness. It's like a lone ranger.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Well, you
got
can't
time for
count on
everyone.
anybody else. You can't. You,
Yeah,
you, you can't
you're the
afford.
guy.
You can't afford. We cannot afford to rely on others doing it in our place.
That's right.
Just like Jesus could not. He could not say, "Yeah, well, maybe Israel will, do what they should be doing."
Maybe the high priest will get their act together
Yeah,
and
maybe.
start worship. Yeah,
He couldn't afford that. So
mm,
he pursued it, as a and he was true, that I'm the only one.
yeah.
So that's a good way to end it.
That is, man. I think we, if we got anybody still listening, I mean,
We keep
I
saying
would,
that. Somebody's going to get tired of us saying that and say, "Would you shut up?"
yeah. Well, I mean, it's like I'm thinking. I think out of all of them, I told you I went back and listened to what two, and when I went back and listened to them, I was like, dang, if somebody could just stomach through some of it. Not that none of it was bad, but I was like, man,
No.
that was better when I listened to it after.
Yeah.
Like I went back and
It's
listened,
almost like
and
you're encouraging yourself. It's almost like
yeah,
you're rah-rahing yourself up.
it's all
And
about us, though. Remember, I mean,
yes, true.
this
It's
is why
true.
we're having these conversations.
Absolutely. Yeah, the check's in the mail soon.
Oh, it's good to record them finally after
Yeah.
years of yeah,
Saying,
forgetting.
"Hey, we need to record these." How
Yeah,
many times have we said that? Man, we should have recorded that.
a lot.
A lot.
Yeah,
All right,
that's
brother.
good, brother. Yeah, good to talk to you today, man.
Rock on, Big Daddy.
Yes, sir.
Bye.
See. Ya.